Welcome into another edition of The Install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Thanksgiving tomorrow as we tape this, but you know Greg never rests. The film is always there. Somebody's got to grind the tape. Greg Cosell always delivers. What's going on, buddy?
Buck, what's happening?
Not much. Just, a little bit. It's been a little TMZ-ish around here as of late, but the performance.
Well, we'll leave that alone.
Yeah, I've had enough of that for one day. But the performance on offense, nonetheless, that we saw in Green Bay since last you and I had a conversation, that's about as complete as the Tennessee Titans have looked all year long, Greg.
They had a pass game, and that's something we've talked about. And obviously, Tannehill was out; he missed a couple of games, and Malik Willis played, and they didn't even really attempt a pass game. But no, they had a pass game, and that's something I think they will need, not only given their next couple of opponents, but assuming that they're in the playoffs, which you might say looks like a relatively sure bet at this point. They're going to need that.
Yes, and certainly it was good to see Treylon Burks be heavily involved as a part of the passing game. Austin Hooper continuing to take advantage of some opportunities. Greg, though, I think the thing that kind of struck me is a couple of weeks ago we talked about, not necessarily being critical of coaching, but wanting to see guys schemed open a little more often within the Titans offense, opposed to these isolation routes that they're asked to win on. Now, obviously, those are still going to be a part of their offense, but it did feel to me, at least watching from an untrained perspective, that they were getting schemed open a little more regularly in this particular game.
Well, the one play that really stood out to me, and I've seen it before, and as soon as I saw it, I thought of the times I'd seen it before, simply because I've been doing this for a long time. But the Hilliard 14-yard touchdown that ended their first possession was a beautifully designed play attacking cover 3. Now, my guess is they knew from the high red zone out of 12 personnel, because they were in 1 back, 2 tight ends. At that point in the field, my guess is they were pretty confident based on film study that they would get cover 3. And that was about as beautifully designed. And it was really uncoverable given the concept, because it was a 4-strong route concept versus the Packers nickel cover 3. So, and it's hard for people to see, but there was no one who could cover Hilliard based on the route concept and the cover 3. So it was really a beautiful design. And as I said, I've seen it before, and I've seen it in the high red zone before. But it was that, to me, when I saw it, I was just, wow, that's really good.
Yeah, and it speaks to a part of why Dontrell Hilliard is such an important part of their offense, because he can run those kind of routes to be able to execute that kind of play.
Yeah, and look, obviously the first drive as well had the Burks 41-yarder. He was number 2 to trips, and they had 3 wide receivers on the field, so it was 11, a 1-by-3 set, meaning the tight end was the single receiver. And the Packers on that play played cover 1 robber, Nixon, who doesn't get many snaps for them in the secondary, but they've had some injuries. Nixon was matched on Burks, and that was a great throw by Tannehill.
Yes, absolutely. So he made a couple of great throws throughout the course of this. The interception, obviously not ideal on 2nd and 1, but it just looked like Rasul Douglas played that really well, and I don't think Tannehill ever saw the defensive back as he kind of drifted into coverage.
That was a ridiculously good play by Douglas. He didn't even account for him. That was just one of those where you just tip your hat. I mean, it was a big time play because it was great awareness and understanding. The Titans actually were in a closed boundary set. Burks was the single receiver to the field. Douglas was actually a box defender to the boundary side. And Tannehill went play action. He was looking to hit Burks on the crosser. And actually, Douglas initially read run. He stepped up, but he did the way what you're coached to do, Buck. He got his eyes inside and hunted up the crosser. But there's no way Tannehill even accounted for him. To me, that was just a great play by a single defender as opposed to a poor play by Tannehill.
Yeah, it was good to see, as you said, the passing game kind of show some life. You mentioned the completion to Traylon Burks for 41 yards. They had explosive plays by Derrick Henry in this game for 42 yards on the ground, and Chigakonkwo, the rookie tight end, for 31 on their score on the drive, I think, that ended up with Derrick Henry throwing a touchdown pass to Austin Hooper, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I can't remember that specifically, but no, they at least had some explosive pass plays, and we know that that's what this offense needs to have, because it's very, very difficult to simply count on Derrick Henry as your offense. Look, the AFC, and we're going to see a lot in the next 2 weeks with the nature, because it's Cincinnati and Kansas City, correct, in the next 2 weeks.
Not for the Titans. They've already lost to Kansas City on the year.
No, not Kansas City.
They will have Philadelphia.
That's what I meant. Yes. So it's Cincinnati and Philadelphia. Now, obviously, Philadelphia's in the NFC, but it's still a high-level opponent. So we're going to find out a good amount about this team. But, the thing is defensively, and I was talking with someone earlier this week about the Titans and, how you would feel about them, having to play Cincinnati, and let's assume it's in the playoffs, Cincinnati, Kansas City, Buffalo at their best. Can they win without the passing game being a big factor? Is their defense good enough? Putting aside what happened earlier in the year with Buffalo, I mean, you get later in the season, things change. But putting aside that, can they win simply with defense and a strong run game without the passing game being a meaningful factor?
Which is the question that we've been asking all offseason and into this season, as we kind of see where they stack up against the rest of these teams, and now jockeying for postseason position. Now that we are officially into the end of November, it's certainly explosive play is going to be on the opposite side of things. They are expecting to have Jamar Chase back when the Bengals come to Nashville this weekend. Joe Burrow, obviously playing an exceptional game himself against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They started 0-2, but so slowly seem to have kind of get things together, and their run game becoming more effective as the year has gone on. In that offensive line, though, Greg, still continues to lose one-on-one matchups that way, and it's just his Burrow's ability to make plays off a schedule is phenomenal. Obviously, it's one of the things that makes him special. But, you talk about sustainability. I don't know how much longer he can just be running around for his life back there.
Yeah, he didn't do a whole lot of that this week, though. I mean,
right.
The Steelers' defensive template this past week versus the Bengals passing game was they played predominant man coverage, and they had 5-man pressure concept. So they came into that game against Cincinnati with the idea, Buck, that they were going to challenge the pass protection with different pressure schemes, and they were going to play man coverage. Now, the problem they had was they had a difficult time covering in man-to-man. Now, the Titans are a team that normally plays man and zone, but when they get to dime on third down, their tendency is mostly man. But they're also not a blitz team. They rely on their 4-man pressure schemes. Now, my sense is Autry will not go this week. Is that likely?
It is almost a certainty at this point.
And that's a big factor, because when they go dime and they have Simmons and Autry inside, and because what they've done, in recent weeks with their dime front has been Autry and Simmons inside and Edwards and Weaver on the outside. Mm-hmm. And that's a good front, good pass rush front. So I assume it might be Walker who replaces him, because we saw Walker replace Simmons a couple of weeks ago. And when Autry got hurt, Walker was the replacement in this past game. But they're not necessarily a big blitz team. Now, could that change? They won't all of a sudden become, the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens, but could they become a little more selective in their pressure concepts? Absolutely, if they feel that's how they want to go about it. But this is a challenge. This is a good passing offense, and Burrow knows where to go with the football.
Yeah.
His sense of eliminating where not to go and then isolating where to go is high level. So this is a good challenge for the defense, and it's a very good defense.
Without Autry, though, and potentially without Christian Fulton, who I didn't necessarily have his best game in Green Bay, Greg, and obviously finished that game injured with a hamstring, but he has on the whole been their best corner so far this year and allows them to do a lot, it feels like.
Yeah, so I mean, without him, then you start getting into, does Avery play? Because obviously he played toward the end of the Green Bay game. How would they play on the outside versus a team that basically plays out of 11 personnel on a very high percentage of snaps.
I guess so. To that point, Greg, the personnel, obviously they're playing towards their personnel when they play so much 11, but what advantages does that give them schematically when they're going up against a defense like the Titans, for example?
You mean playing 11?
Yeah.
Well, they play 11 pretty much all the time. I think they have the second highest percentage of 11 personnel snaps in the league. That's just the way they play. Look, they've got 3 really good wide receivers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their best use of personnel. So that they want to put their best players out there clearly. And if Chase is back, I don't know if he'll be on a pitch count, but Higgins, you could argue Higgins is a number 1. He's just a 1A on their team. And Boyd is one of the better slot receivers in the game. And even Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst is not a bad tight end. There's just only one ball, so he doesn't get a lot of volume. But he's not a bad player by any means. And he's got some athleticism and vertical ability as well. Mixon, my guess is that he would not go this week. So I think
concussion is what he suffered against the Steelers. So unlikely at this point.
Yeah, so because now with the concussion issues, pretty much guys when they get one do not play the next week. It seems to be that's kind of the rule now. So it'll be Pirine, who's not a bad player, by the way, but they're and they do want to try to run the ball with Mixon. They do try to run the ball. Could they change up their balance a little bit and throw it a little more? Much of that would depend, I think, on how the game plays out with their protection.
So you mentioned Samaje Perine, who will likely be the running back for the Bengals in this game. For obviously, we know who Joe Mixon is through college and in the pros now, an established player, high level player. But from a trait standpoint, what's indicative of Perine's game at this point when you kind of watch him?
What's interesting, Buck, is and even though Mixon is a very good receiver, what they have done the last couple of years with Pirine is he normally is the third down back, which is kind of surprising simply because Mixon is a good receiver, but Pirine has been the third down back. So they obviously feel very good about him, not only as a receiver, but the key point here is in pass protection. Mm-hmm. So that tells me he's a better pass protector than Mixon, because this is a team that needs pass protection, particularly on third down. So, again, I don't think they would be coming into this game with the idea that Perine's getting 25 carries. I think they're going to throw the ball. That's kind of what they do. They put the Burrow is the driving force, and the quality of receiver, because now if you're talking about Fulton being out, you're going to get McCrary at one outside corner, or maybe he's not an outside corner. Maybe because if you're playing in nickel or dime all the time, maybe the outside corners are Avery and Mitchell, and McCrary's playing, the nickel slot, which could well be the case.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch it. Greg, kind of going back to the Titans offense and obviously points will be at a premium. Their points are always at a premium for a team like the Titans when you play things so close to the vest. But beyond, I mean, they were not very often penalized in this game. They had one special teams penalty that had a drive start within their own 10-yard line.
Yeah.
But beyond that, for the first time this year, they did not have a lot of operational penalties, a lot of pre-snap penalties. Was it as simple as that for them sustaining drives? Obviously, you need the players to execute, but it felt like they gave themselves more chances just by nature of playing a cleaner game. Or did you see something else that you really liked?
Well, I mean, I think that always helps because if you can stay somewhat ahead of the sticks, the playbook opens up more. The defense has more they have to deal with. You can be more diverse and multiple with your personnel and formation usage. So, I think that always plays into it. Keep in mind that Tannehill had 8 dropbacks on third down in this game, okay? He was 6 for 6 for 95 yards. Now, he was sacked twice, but 4 of those 6 completions resulted in first downs. 3 of those 4 were third down and 7+. So they were very good on third down. And here's the stat that probably speaks more to the success than anything. Tannehill had 5 completions of more than 20 yards. Mm-hmm. We don't see that very often from the Titans pass game.
No, and certainly it felt like a previous version of what we're used to seeing them run, and without a crazy Derrick Henry performance, although you run for one, you throw one. He's having a pretty good day. Greg, as we sit here taping the podcast, the Rams just ruled out Matt Stafford again. So Bryce Perkins is going to be their starting quarterback, it would seem. John Walford also got injured in the Rams last game. The quarterback situation around the league today has been pretty crazy. Zach Wilson benched. We've seen the decision that the Panthers made to move forward with Sam Darnold as opposed to Baker Mayfield while PJ Walker misses time. Obviously all these situations are different, injuries, performance, and the like. But the Zach Wilson thing, Greg, I don't know how much of that Patriot. I assume you have broken down the Patriots and the Jets by now. However much offense there was to particularly study in that game, but the Wilson thing, I wonder if you can speak to kind of what the coaching staff is seeing, whether, what led into their decision is, we don't know the answer to that question necessarily, but 2 yards of offense in the second half of that game was a pretty difficult thing to watch.
I mean, I can only tell you about the tape, and they can't get a first down. Wilson at this point in time does not see things well at all. He's a reckless, undisciplined player. He literally can't complete passes. So, you have a team that's actually pretty good. They've got a really good defense. They've got a defense that's good enough to be in the playoffs. An offense that has some pretty good skill position players. Obviously, they lost Breece Hall, but they've got some good skill position players on offense. And the quarterback is killing them because he can't complete balls. They can't get first downs. They're at the point, Buck, where they just need to get a first down. I mean, think about that. That's where they are. And again, I'm not in their locker room. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure Coach Mack could address this better than I could. But, you've got a pretty good football team. And, you have not only veteran players, but even young players. We saw Garrett Wilson speak. Garrett Wilson comes from the Ohio State program. He's used to winning, and guys like C.J. Mosley, who've been in the league a long time, with good teams. He doesn't care who the quarterback is. He just wants the team to win. And right now, the quarterback is hurting them big time. He's hurting a good football team. So, you always hear the phrase lose the locker room. We're not there, but I would assume that element exists with the Jets.
Yeah, it's only human. I mean, right. You can't blame them for having human emotions in that moment. Justin Fields, unfortunately, Greg, dealing with an AC joint injury, it sounds like, and what his availability moving forward.
I'm glad you brought him up because we've had this discussion in our matchup room. I've had it with other people. Let me ask you this, and I think this is a fascinating intellectual conversation. I'm not taking sides, and because you say this and people automatically assume you're denigrating or you're hating. I think it's a great intellectual discussion. What have we learned about Justin Fields this year?
I mean, we knew what kind of an explosive runner he is. I don't feel like, the thing I feel like I've learned is that he plays better out of structure than he does within an offensive scheme that they're trying to get him to kind of capitulate to.
Right. So, all right. So let's now keep asking questions because, coaches are probably having these conversations as well. That's the thing. I've been fortunate in my career to have been invited to training camps and sit in the late night meetings with coaches when I hear them talk about a lot of things that obviously they don't say publicly. So now we know he's an explosive runner, and that's the way he's made a lot of his plays over the last number of weeks. And you cannot deny the fact that they've scored a lot of points. Yes. Can't deny that. That's a mathematical equation. That's right there in front of us. So here's the question. Are we now saying to some degree that running is more important than passing for a quarterback or for Justin Fields? Because their pass game based purely on tape is remedial in elementary by NFL standards. And again, I'm not knocking Justin Fields. I'm simply telling you what the tape shows. So what are we ultimately, are we now, as more quarterbacks come into the league, DRT from UCLA, I know you watch college football, quarterbacks like that, are we now going to start thinking in terms of running is more important than passing for a quarterback at the NFL level, that you can function with a remedial pass game if your quarterback is an explosive runner? Is that sort of the next step? Is that where we're going with this?
I would think, Greg, that there has to be some thought given to that stuff, given how many more of these, how much more you could, more is probably the wrong word, but I just think that at some point, the ability to manufacture offense in some way, shape, or form, given explosive playmakers, whether the quarterback position and they do it with their legs, or whatever you have. I mean, that has to trickle up in the way that so many different concepts from college has. Maybe you can't do it at the elite level, at the top level where these defenders can run as fast as you can. More often than not, guys like Malik Willis find that out very, very quickly in the NFL.
Right.
But I do think that the question is fascinating because, you know, for as much as that exists in the minor league level of college football, can there not be a way to figure out how to do it at the pros? I think we've seen some variations of it. But Lamar is an exceptional passer on top of being able to be an explosive runner.
Yeah, I mean, let's think of it in terms of the Titans. So let's say for whatever reason next year Malik Willis is their quarterback. Just for, who knows what the future holds.
Yeah.
So are we going to be in a situation where the Titans, in a sense, say, hey, now we have the Justin Fields model. Let's run a really basic structured pass game where we don't ask him to do much at all in the pass game, but he's a dynamic, explosive runner. And let's make his running sort of the foundational element of our quarterback. That's what our quarterback's going to do. Is that where we're going with some of these guys?
Can they play the 2022 Texans run defense every week? Because maybe, I mean, it's right. It is. I just don't think it's sustainable. I think at some point in any given game, you have to have some kind of a functional passing game and can't just completely go one-dimensional that way. But I mean, the Fields thing is there have been case studies like this before. You could speak to this better than I can based off tape study, but it does seem like that has to have a place somewhere in the league, whatever the next evolution of this is.
Are the younger generation sabermetrics analytics guys going to say that in response to coaches who say, hey, at some point you have to be able to throw it efficiently from the pocket, are they going to say, oh, those just are old guys talking now and that's not true anymore?
Listen, I mean, obviously coaches are aware of how much more of an advantage they have on the offensive side when the quarterback has to be accounted for at any given point, when you have to defend 11 on 11 that way. I don't know if it goes quite as far as extreme as you've just mentioned, but it's going to be a conversation.
Because the other issue that you deal with, and see this, I love these conversations because I find these to be intellectual and academic. There's no right. I'm not taking a side. No. I'm just trying to think this through. So those, by
the way, I think are the best conversations when you just flesh stuff out like this.
Yeah. So the question becomes, how does Justin Fields, if you're going to play this way, or maybe, like I said, maybe they're not going to view it as necessary, but how does Justin Fields learn to develop the detail and the nuance and the disciplines necessary to make the critical 3rd and 9 throw where he can't leave the pocket, okay? And he's going to have to throw the ball in a critical situation. How is he going to develop that if, in a sense, you don't really spend a lot of time working on that because he's a great runner and you feel like, hey, we can score 30 points a game and he can run?
It's got to be incumbent upon the coaching staff to make sure that is incorporated into what they're trying to do. If that's the direction that they want to go with them, Greg, I think that it takes almost a degree of discipline to say, okay, no, he has to be able to operate our passing game. We can't just defer time and time again to him making a play with the ball in his hands, even though it seems to be the thing that helps us the most right now.
Right. And does at some point, because he's essentially a first-year player. I mean, last year he played whatever number of games, but he wasn't playing quite like this. So at some point, do defenses, prevent the so-called big explosive running plays? Because, look, even Lamar, okay? I mean, he's an unbelievable runner, and Fields is a different kind of runner, but they're both ridiculously explosive. Even Lamar, he's got to throw the ball from the pocket somewhere along the line, and you could argue he's pretty good at it. I'm just trying to figure this out.
No, I guess the answer is probably more a philosophical one as it relates to, like, okay, is this your guy for the foreseeable future? Like, are you going to invest in the time that you're talking about that it will take Justin Fields to be able to, implement your passing game that way? Or are you an NFL team that's in a situation with a quarterback right now that's a bit of a stopgap, that has that kind of mobility that we're talking about, but may not necessarily be able to pass at that level? And can you go through a season or two, whatever the length ends up being, running a certain kind of offense that's I don't want to say unconventional, but unconventional within the modern
Right,
sense
and
of
you've
NFL
seen
football.
the same things I have, Buck. That people in our business, whether it's writers, people who cover the NFL are already talking about Justin Fields as a great young quarterback. Now, that might be hyperbole, but the point is they're speaking about that based on the way in which he's playing now. So, ultimately, can you be a great quarterback playing that way? Is he just different? In other words, is it pointless to try to compare Joe Burrow and Justin Fields? Is that a pointless argument? At some point, does Justin Fields have to make throws?
Within the conventional definition of quarterback, I do feel like it's a pointless argument, right? Because they're not playing the same game at this point in their careers. So I do think that either there's going to be an evolution of how you define the quarterback position among NFL,
or we're going to find out, and I'm not saying we will or won't, we're going to find out that the way Justin Fields is playing is not truly sustainable, and he's going to have to learn how to play from the pocket.
So instead of saying that he's a great young quarterback, talking heads and the like, vultures like me, maybe a young quarterback who's playing great right now.
Right. Maybe.
But yeah, you're right. I really think that's one of the more interesting kind of like long-term storylines in the NFL at this point. And I think that your coach, I know that coaches around the league are having these same conversations, and certainly within the Bears organization.
Right. And no, I find all this fascinating. And like I said, I don't want people to take away that, I don't think Justin Fields is any good or that I have the answer, because believe me, I talked to coaches this offseason who definitely said that they factor in this, the movement ability and the running ability more than they ever have. Now, it's not a mathematical equation. No coach is going to say, well, I factor it in 23%. No one thinks of it like that. But I just think it's going to be really, really interesting, because the colleges are going to be putting out more guys theoretically like Justin Fields than the true pocket players. People now believe, rightly or wrongly, that you have to be able to make plays outside of structure to ultimately function in this league because of the way defenses now play.
It's just such a higher level of skill and execution at the defensive level that you have to have some of those plays that you can't necessarily account for or count on any given week. Just these kind of ridiculous plays that you see from guys like Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes when they're able to operate.
So watch. The Bucs will win the Super Bowl again with Tom Brady this year, and then what are we going to do?
Listen, buddy, if Tom is even close, I don't bet against him at this point.
Right.
Just that's the one hard and fast rule that I have. Until I see that guy leave a football field, I'm going to continue to think that he can still do it. The NFL Matchup Show is doing it this weekend. Of course, you can set your DVR. You can catch it live on Saturday and Sunday mornings. You can get it on ESPN Plus on demand. Greg, a lot of fun games coming up on Thanksgiving that I know you guys aren't going to talk about. But
we are going to be talking about the Tennessee game.
It's certainly worth talking about. Do you have the package, or does Darius?
No, Darius actually did a piece on their pass game, on the Titans pass game, because it awoke from its slumber last week. So he did a piece on it.
Now, you better do one quickly, because Lord knows it's
no,
tough
I think
to find
they're going to keep
here.
working in that direction. I mean, I think they know that. I mean, does that mean it's going to look like that every week and Tannehill's going to have those numbers every week? No. But I think that they understand that the pass game needs to be a factor.
No, it doesn't have to look like Green Bay, but if it can look like the second half against Denver when they needed a couple of plays to win, then that's, I think, the thing that they're kind of trying to find at a sustainable rate at this point. Well, Greg, it's always a pleasure. Happy Thanksgiving. I appreciate you spending some time with us as you do each and every week. We're grateful for your presence on the podcast, and enjoy the football this weekend.
All right. Thanks, Buck.